Hello, and welcome to show number 2449 of Eyes on Success, a weekly program covering a wide variety of topics of interest to people with vision loss. I'm Nancy Goodman Torpey.
And I'm Pete Torpey.
I think we all share a vision of a world where there are no stumbling blocks to engagement in religious life in any form. So for us, what that means is that we have the wealth of different kinds of materials that allow for full access to a spiritual life.
And today we'll be talking about some of those materials and where you can get them.
Accessible religious materials enable people to fully engage with their communities. We'll talk with Livia Thompson from JBI and Malachy Fallon from Xavier Society for the Blind about how each organization produces materials in braille, audio, and large print to help visually impaired patrons participate in family and congregational events. But first, for our tip of the week. This week's tip is really more of a tidbit, but we thought it was kind of interesting, and it comes from Livia Thompson.
We all know that English is read left to right, and English Braille is read left to right. What people might not know is that generally when you read Hebrew in print, it's read right to left. However, Hebrew Braille is also read left to right, because at the time that the rules and regulations around Hebrew Braille were solidified, they didn't want to have to think about different margins and different ways of handling paper. And so Hebrew Braille is read left to right using the same dots, but in different patterns than English Braille.
That is really an interesting fact.
I never knew that.
Support for Eyes on Success is provided by
Glidance, Pioneers of Glide, an intelligent guide for the blind and low vision community. Glide's AI-powered technology guides you around obstacles, hazards, and more, providing audio and haptic feedback, getting you where you need to go safely and independentce. More information is at glidance.io/eyes. That's glidance.io/EYES.
and by
InnoSearch AI, an accessible e-commerce tool for the blind. You can find your favorite electronics, groceries, or do some early holiday shopping at InnoSearch.ai, now partnered with over 500,000 retailers. That's InnoSearch.ai.
You are listening to Eyes on Success. Success, 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 success.
Let's start by meeting Livia and Malachy.
We have two guests with us today, and I thought maybe, Livia, we could start by having you introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Hi, I'm Livia Thompson, and I'm the executive director of JBI. And JBI works with anyone who is blind, low vision, or has print disabilities and wants access to materials and programming of Jewish life in all of its facets.
And what does JBI stand for?
So historically, starting in 1931, JBI stood for the Jewish Braille Institute. But our materials include audio, large print, and Braille. And we are proud of the fact that we have expanded to serve individuals in multiple formats.
And our second guest is Malachy. Maybe you can introduce yourself and tell a little bit about what you do.
Sure, thank you. Again, Malachy Fallon. I'm the executive director at Xavier Society for the Blind. I've been in that role since September of 2016, so just a little bit over 8 years. And Xavier Society, we like to say, our tagline is that we deliver faith and inspiration in Braille and audio. So we provide reading materials mostly Catholic in nature, but not exclusively, in braille and audio. And in recent months, we've been starting to reintroduce some of that content in large print as well.
And how long has the Xavier Society been around?
Since 1900. We were founded in 1900 here in New York City.
Wow. So both of these organizations have been serving the various communities for a fairly long time. How neat.
Eyes on Success connects corporate sponsors with visually impaired listeners around the world.
More information about becoming a sponsor can be found at www.sponsor.eyesonsuccess.net.
This week's focus topic is how JBI and the Xavier Society for the Blind each produce materials in braille, audio, and large print to help visually impaired patrons participate fully in their spiritual lives.
Well, Livia, in the introduction, you talked a bit about your mission in sort of global terms, and I was wondering if you could give us some more specific idea of the types of material and the things that people can find from JBI.
Sure, I'd be delighted to. So we are a lending library with about 15,000 audiobooks. Most of those audiobooks are non-liturgical. They're secular books, history and poetry and literature of all kinds. We also have children's books. Some of those books are also available in braille or large print as part of our lending library. Those are always free to patrons, to individuals who qualify, and the qualification process is the same as that for NLS, which means that you are blind or have low vision or a print disability. Another section of our materials are liturgical materials, prayer books, and the Bible, or what we call the Torah. And those materials are gifts that keep on giving. We send them out. We do not want them back. We want you to keep using them. And then we also have some specialty items like an annual calendar that has all of the Jewish holidays on it and federal holidays and candle lighting time. And those also are in braille and in large print. Sometimes our large print materials are also in Russian or other languages. We have materials in 9 languages in total. And we also serve multiple denominations. So our materials are deliberately allow individuals to engage however they choose to engage in the kind of work that we can provide. So secular, liturgical, library, the gift that we do not want back, and multiple languages and multiple formats.
Are you restricted to U.S. citizens and residents, or do you have an overseas client base as well?
So we're not restricted at all. Within the United States, we serve anyone and everyone who comes to us. We also provide services to individuals in 23 other countries right now. And we also work with organizations that are seeking to be more accessible. So we will work with an organization to make their materials more accessible or to provide materials for the individuals with whom they work that might be interested in our materials. And lastly, we are building our materials working with an international consortium that is based out of the UN, and our materials will become available to approximately libraries in 70 countries that are part of this consortium, and we're very excited about that as well.
Wow.
And Malachy, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the specific types of materials that you distribute and to what kind of audience.
Sure. So we serve about 2,500 patrons, and those folks are located here in the United States and in just about 20 countries outside the United States. So we provide a variety of books. We have about 1,400 titles in our Braille catalog and a similar amount in our audio catalog. On a variety of topics, as I said earlier, mostly related to the Catholic faith, but not exclusively. There are a lot of titles that we have that are of more general interest or related to faith generally, religion generally, and inspiration. One of our biggest offerings would be the Sunday Mass propers. So the readings and the prayers and the responses for the Catholic Mass in Braille. And we provide that in English. And then we have a more limited version of that in Spanish Braille. And that goes out to about 800 people each and every month. And we did a back of the envelope calculation a couple of years ago, and that amounts to about 760,000 pages of Braille each year.
Wow.
I was interested when both of you talked about how centralized some of this seemed to be. It's very well organized. I always had the sense that services like this were a little bit more distributed, that the local congregations had people who were volunteers creating this material and distributing these books and other information within their own congregation. But this sounds very centralized.
So we actually do it both ways. Historically, when JBI was founded by a blind rabbi and a young blind man in 1931, we worked with what were then called sisterhoods across the country. And those sisterhoods created Braille books, which became available to individuals who needed them. That may be what you're referring to. At this point, we do almost all the physical work on site at 30th and Park, which is where our offices are.
In New York City.
In New York City, we have brailing machines, we have large print machines, we have 6 audio studios. And then those materials get pushed out to individuals who need them, and also institutions, including synagogues, that order them for either patrons that they already have or patrons that they want to be able to serve without those patrons having to ask. So a lot of our material ends up in synagogues, but much of it also ends up in individual homes.
Wow, that's interesting. You really are a full-service production house in that regard then. And I guess all this information is sent out free matter for the blind, so patrons don't have to worry about paying postage back and forth.
That's right. It's free matter to the blind. With an institution, there is a small fee if they buy one of our prayer books or calendars, but we try to keep everything very reasonable because our goal is accessibility, and the more that we can push materials out, the happier we are.
I was going to say, to your point about being decentralized versus being centralized, I mean, there's a fair amount of technical expertise required for producing Braille and audio books. So I think that's one of the reasons why we tend to be more centralized. And, we have that expertise, our staff has that expertise. But we do rely on volunteer readers who do work remotely for us in some instances. So we can have volunteer readers, in California, all across the country. And with the use of technology, we're able to transfer files back and forth and to our freelance audio engineers to work on those audio books for us as well.
I'm curious, in the conversion of books from print to Braille, is that still done by having an individual type in the Braille, or do you have that computerized and automated somehow?
There is a fair amount of automation involved. A little bit depends on the format of the printed material that we're receiving. And it's quite amazing what technology now allows us to do. There's still a human hand involved in proofreading, in making sure that the margins work, in creating something that when it is physically embossed will fit properly on the paper and will be usable by the patron. And the other piece, which is always a little bit remarkable to me, is because it's approximately 3 to 4 pages of Braille to 1 page of print, we also have to think about weight and volume. And so when we do a large book, for example, in Braille, it might become 3 or 4 volumes. And that's a bit of the human, and maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah, and then also we tend to do a lot of books, textbooks for children and workbooks, resource books for children who are learning about their faith. And because of that, the formatting is very important. There are a lot of pictures, there are a lot of diagrams. So while technology can do the bulk of that, the human intervention is still required. And we have a certified Braille transcriber on staff here that really spends a lot of time on those types of books.
And the other thing I think both of us are doing more of is, because of technology, we now can create what are called BRF files, electronic Braille files that can be sent to anyone that has an e-reader. And therefore, we can skip the step of a physical embossing and get the Braille to someone much more quickly. We do that for our audio books as well. We can send a digital file, and to some extent, large print, although that's a little more complicated.
So it sounds like a lot of this must be done by professionals. My first impression was that it was a lot of volunteer work, but it sounds very specialized, and you need a fair amount of training to convert the material into these various formats, go through the production process and all that. Who are the people who do this work?
So as I mentioned, we have a certified Braille transcriber on staff. We have a full-time audio and technology manager. And then we also engage with freelance audio engineers to help us with the audio book, sort of the post-production work on those.
So we also have over 100 volunteers, some of whom record books, others of whom do programming for us. We have 3 book groups run by volunteers. We have special programs, both in person and through Zoom, that are done by volunteers. We also have a professional sound studio manager and engineers who help make sure that the quality of our audiobooks is good. We have a number of staff that are blind who are part of our production process. And that's super important because we need to make sure that for the end user, especially when we're laying out Braille, it's going to make sense. And they help us make sure that we are meeting the needs of our patrons. So it's a combination of many technically skilled individuals who are paid staff and an incredible array and host of volunteers. And like Xavier, we also now allow remote recordings of books.
And I can attest to the quality of JBI's recording studios because Livia has been good enough to let us have access to those studios as well.
Oh, that's good. So it's a cooperative venture. Everybody's sort of doing the same thing for their patrons and the people who use these services. And to share that is really a good thing.
We share and learn from each other all the time. It's not quite joined at the hip, but it's a pleasure to be able to work with another organization that's trying to do similar work and understand and learn.
Right. You can both gain from each other.
Completely. Yeah.
When we were setting up this interview in the notes back and forth, somebody made a comment about these materials and the other services you provide, enabling individuals to participate more fully in their religious community, whether it's a family event or a congregation getting together for a formal service or some other event. And with the winter holidays coming up, for many religions, not just the Catholics and the Jews, of course, there's Christmas and Hanukkah, but also Kwanzaa and the winter solstice and Diwali and many, many other holidays. How do you feel that your work is able to enhance the participation of people with vision loss in their religious community?
Probably the best example for us, annually we have a St. Lucy Mass here in New York City. St. Lucy is one of the Catholic patron saints of blind and visually impaired people. And at that Mass, we have a blind priest who travels up every year from Owensboro, Kentucky, to be the main celebrant. And he uses our materials and has used our braille materials while he was in seminary, and still does receive quite a number of books from us. So it's really the embodiment of our mission to see our patrons actively participating not only in the congregation, but on the altar as the main celebrant and as lectors during the Mass of St. Lucy each year.
Picking up on Malachy's story, I think we all share a vision of a world where there are no stumbling blocks to engagement in religious life in any form. So for us, what that means is we think about what can we do working with individuals to make sure that, one, they don't have to ask, the materials are available. Two, that the materials are available in the format and in the physical form that they will need. And three, that we have the wealth of different kinds of materials that allow for full access to a spiritual life. And one of the things that we've also discovered in our work is, and we try to leverage now, is that it's not just the creation of the material in a format that is accessible to that individual, but then it's also about helping them build a community that uses those materials in a way that allows them to feel fully present. So it might be what we call the Haggadah, which is the book that's used at a Seder, which allows an individual to be part of their family in a way that maybe they weren't the year before when they couldn't see the text. Or the Torah being available in braille so that when somebody is sitting in a congregation and hearing the Torah chanted, they can follow along. Or, plethora of prayer books that we provide that allow people to sit in the pews and not feel isolated when the clergy leader says, let's turn to page 32. It's really an important part of embracing the idea that religious engagement is for all and everyone, to make sure that that can be manifested in the kinds of materials that we provide to patrons.
Yeah, and another good example for Xavier Society, we try this time of year, we try to produce books that we think would be of interest, given the time of year. And one recent addition to our Braille catalog is a book called One Great Love, an Advent and Christmas treasury of readings, poems, and prayers. So again, we're always looking for content that we think that be of interest to our patrons, and more broadly as well.
Well, that's a great service that both of your organizations provide, because as we mentioned before we started recording, a lot of this material is just not available through other places like the National Library Service or other places that traditionally serve people with vision problems. And to have this available makes it easier for people to participate in their communities and enjoy the seasons and events year-round. And I would encourage other people to check out whatever religion they might be a part of, to check with their organizations to see if they offer similar services, because many of them do to a certain extent, even if it's not quite as formalized and put together as your two organizations seem to be. So great work, guys.
Well, thank you.
You are listening to Eyes on Success. Success, 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 success.
Now for this week's final item, how to contact JBI and Xavier Society for the Blind, as well as our guests, Livia Thompson and Malachy Fallon.
If people want to avail themselves of these services and take advantage of the great work that you're doing, Livia, where would you send them?
It may be easiest for them to either call our 800 number, which is 800-433-1531, or they can visit our website, www.jbilibrary.org. They're always welcome to call me directly as well. I can be reached at 212-545-8030 or by email at lthompson@jbilibrary.org. And we would be delighted to try to support your interests in any way we can.
And again, you just need to be certifiably reading impaired in some way or another. It's open to mostly anybody.
Right. And it's a very simple process that our librarians can help anyone who needs help to become certified or to become an official patron of ours to do so. And if you're already an NLS patron, then it's an even easier process.
Do you have a social media presence as well?
We do have a social media presence. We have a Facebook, and we do post periodically. Our website also has a lot of our information.
And Malachy, how about you? How can people avail themselves of your services?
And I was going to say, similar to JBI, we try not to put up any additional barriers for people. So to register as a patron with us is relatively simple. But the best way to get to us is to go to our website, Xavier Society for the Blind.org, or just call our 800 number, and that's 800-637-9193. And we're also on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. So great way just to see some of the content that we have and learn about some of the wonderful patrons we serve.
Can you spell Xavier?
Xavier.
Great.
And I just wanted to note, I didn't specifically indicate that JBI also has an Instagram and LinkedIn presence. So lots of different ways to connect.
As usual, you can find all of that information in the show notes associated with this episode, which is number 2449.
That's it for today's show. Next week on Eyes on Success, we'll be talking about an exciting new announcement from the Hilton Hotel Corporation and Be My Eyes. We'll speak with Nicole Bergstrom, Hilton's Senior Director of Digital Accessibility, about Hilton's commitment to accessibility and inclusivity. We'll learn about their partnership with Be My Eyes, using either Hilton staff or AI to assist visually impaired individuals, and discover how Hilton is using technology to improve the guest experience for everyone.
And we wish a happy holidays for all of our listeners around the world. Hope you're all enjoying yourselves, and catch you for next week's show.
You've been listening to Eyes on Success, hosted and produced by Nancy Goodman Torpey and Peter Torpey.
You can access the full archive of previous shows, subscribe to the podcast, and much more by going to our website, www.eyesonsuccess.net. If you have questions about anything you've heard on the show or have suggestions for future shows, send an email to hosts@eyesonsuccess.net.
Thank you for listening, and have a nice day.